Entrepreneurs, innovators, future CEOs, listen up. Imagine your business with an ever-growing credit card bill. Now imagine you can only pay the interest, never the principal. That's not just a finance nightmare, it's our national reality. Ray Dalio says, something serious is about to hit America, and unless we pivot boldly, we're in real trouble. Imagine running a company that generates record revenues, but instead of reinvesting wisely, every year you pile on more loans just to cover old ones. Eventually, the weight of those loans becomes so crushing that your company's entire cash flow is consumed just by paying interest. You can't expand, you can't innovate, and you can't protect yourself when a crisis hits. That's not a hypothetical business scenario, it's the reality facing the United States right now. Debt has ballooned to a level so massive it almost defies comprehension. We're talking about more than $36 trillion and climbing with no brakes in sight. But here's the catch, it's not just about the number. Numbers can always look abstract. The real danger is in what those numbers mean. They mean interest payments are eating up a historic share of the budget. Money that could have gone into healthcare, education, infrastructure, or even innovation. Instead, it's just servicing old promises. Think about that. A nation as powerful as America, yet caught in a cycle where growth is being siphoned away simply to keep the debt machine alive. This isn't just a balance sheet issue. It's a strategic crisis. In business, when debt servicing grows faster than revenue growth, you know you're in trouble. That's exactly where we are now. Debt is compounding faster than the economy is growing. And unlike a startup, America can't pivot on a dime, cut staff, or restructure overnight. The system is too big, too slow, and too political. That's what makes this warning so serious. Entrepreneurs, innovators, future CEOs, listen up. Imagine your business with an ever-growing credit card bill. Now imagine you can only pay the interest, never the principal. That's not just a finance nightmare, it's our national reality. Ray Dalio says, something serious is about to hit America, and unless we pivot boldly, we're in real trouble. Picture the economy as a heart. Right now, the arteries are clogging with plaque. Every new dollar borrowed is more plaque building up, and every new interest payment is less oxygen reaching vital organs. Eventually, there's a heart attack, and just like in medicine, you rarely get advance notice of exactly when it'll strike. But you do get symptoms: rising borrowing costs, investor anxiety, pressure on the dollar, erosion of confidence. All those symptoms are flashing red right now. And here's the real kicker. This crisis doesn't need decades to play out. It could arrive within years. When markets lose confidence in America's ability to manage its debt, they'll demand higher interest rates to lend. Higher interest rates mean even more expensive borrowing. That's the vicious spiral. Once it starts, stopping it is like trying to patch a dam that's already bursting. Now, let's put this in perspective. This isn't about doom and gloom, it's about recognizing the gravity of the situation and thinking like leaders. Just like a CEO who takes over a company drowning in liabilities, the only way out is through discipline, restructuring, and decisive action. There has to be a strategy to cut deficits, and it has to be executed while the economy is still strong. Waiting until the storm hits means you're already too late. But there's another layer. The political reality is paralyzing. Leaders know what needs to be done. Spend less, cut the fat, make the system leaner. But they're afraid of the backlash. No politician wants to be the one telling voters the party's over. That fear has created gridlock. Both sides point fingers while the debt snowball keeps rolling. If this were a startup, indecision at this level would mean bankruptcy. In the case of a nation, it risks not just financial collapse but geopolitical weakness. Because make no mistake, economic strength is the foundation of military strength, technological leadership, and global influence. If the finances crack, everything else follows. This is why the warning matters so much. The debt isn't just a line on a government spreadsheet. It's the oxygen supply for innovation, security, and future growth. Without action, that oxygen gets choked off and recovery becomes harder, maybe impossible. The lesson here is universal. Whether you're running a business, managing your own finances, or building a nation, debt is leverage, but it's also a ticking clock. Used wisely, it fuels growth. Abused, it suffocates it. The opportunity, however, is still alive. It's not too late. There is a window where bold, disciplined leadership can turn this around. Just as businesses have turned deficits into profitability through vision and execution, the same can be done here. But it requires courage. Courage to make unpopular choices, courage to face reality, and courage to think beyond the next election cycle. The bottom line is this: America is at a crossroads. Either we confront the debt head on with discipline and foresight, or we sleepwalk into a crisis that history will remember as the moment we lost our economic edge. For entrepreneurs, for business leaders, for citizens, the message is clear. Act before the heart attack, not after. Think about this for a second. If you were running a company and every single quarter your expenses went up faster than your revenues, you would know you're in trouble. If on top of that, you had to borrow money every year just to pay off the interest on old loans, you'd know it wasn't sustainable. That's exactly where America stands today, and the numbers are staggering. We're talking about more than $36 trillion in debt, climbing higher every single day. It's not just an abstract figure that sits in some spreadsheet in Washington. It's a real weight pressing down on the economy, and it's growing faster than the nation's ability to support it. Now here's where most people miss the point. Debt by itself isn't always bad. In business, debt can be a tool for growth. You borrow to build, you borrow to expand, you borrow because you know the return will be greater than the cost of the loan. But when debt is growing faster than your income, it flips from being an asset to being a liability. That's where we are now. The U.S. is borrowing not to invest in the future, but to pay for the past. It's like maxing out one credit card just to cover the payment on another. Eventually, that house of cards comes crashing down. The real danger isn't just the headline number, though. It's what that number does to everything else. Interest payments are exploding. A bigger and bigger slice of the budget is going just to service the debt. That means less money for things that actually create value: education, infrastructure, innovation, healthcare. Imagine running your company where 40% of your revenue went purely to pay the bank, and you couldn't put anything into product development or marketing. How long would you expect to compete in the market like that? Not very long, and that's the exact trajectory this country is on if nothing changes. There's also the issue of confidence. Investors, both at home and around the world, buy U.S. bonds because they believe in America's ability to pay them back. That belief is what makes the U.S. dollar the backbone of global finance, but belief is fragile. Once doubts creep in, the cost of borrowing shoots up, and here's the vicious cycle. The more it costs to borrow, the bigger the interest payments become, and the faster the debt spiral accelerates. When you're already this deep in the hole, a loss of confidence can trigger a chain reaction almost overnight. History has shown this pattern before. Nations that overspend and overborrow eventually face a reckoning. Sometimes it looks like inflation. Sometimes it looks like currency devaluation. Sometimes it looks like recession, but the outcome is always painful, and right now, the warning signs are everywhere. Rising borrowing costs, political gridlock, and growing global skepticism about American fiscal discipline, these are the symptoms of a system under strain, and if ignored, they lead to something much bigger than just a slowdown. The tough part is that everyone knows what needs to be done. The deficit has to be cut, spending has to be controlled, and fiscal discipline has to be restored, but the political will isn't there. Leaders are afraid to deliver the hard truth because voters don't want to hear it. Cutting deficits means sacrifice, and sacrifice is rarely popular. But in business, the unpopular decisions are often the ones that save the company. It's the painful restructuring, the tough layoffs, the leaner operations that position the company for survival and eventual growth. Without that courage, the company dies. For a nation, the stakes are even higher because the fallout isn't just financial. It's social, it's political, it's global. And here's something else to think about. The debt problem doesn't exist in isolation. Layer on top of it the global trade wars, geopolitical rivalries, rising tariffs, and you've got a combustible mix. Debt weakens the ability to respond to external shocks. In times of crisis, flexibility is everything. But when your hands are tied by obligations, your ability to maneuver is gone. It's like trying to fight a heavyweight boxing match with your arms chained to your sides. You're going to get knocked out, no matter how tough you are. The truth is this moment is a test. It's a test of leadership, a test of discipline, and a test of whether there's still enough vision to act before the breaking point. Debt doesn't have to be destiny. Just as a company can turn itself around with the right strategy, so can a nation. It takes cutting the fat, demanding accountability, and refusing to kick the can further down the road. Waiting only makes the eventual reckoning harsher. Every entrepreneur understands the principle: you can't spend what you don't earn forever. The bill always comes due. And when it does, the question is whether you're ready to pay it on your own terms or whether it's forced on you in crisis. America is staring at that question right now. The path forward is tough, but it's also clear. Discipline today, stability tomorrow, indecision today, collapse tomorrow. The choice is in the hands of leaders, but the consequences will be felt by everyone. When you're running a business, you live and die by your margins. If expenses outpace revenue, you tighten up. You cut waste, you streamline operations, you focus on what drives results. You don't wait until the company is gasping for air. You act while there's still room to maneuver. That same principle applies to nations, and right now, America's financial health depends on hitting one target: bringing the deficit down to about 3% of GDP. That number isn't just pulled from thin air. It's the threshold that historically keeps debt sustainable and manageable. Beyond it, debt starts spiraling faster than growth, and that's when the whole system cracks. Think about it like this. If you earn $100, you can't keep spending $120 forever. At first, you can borrow to cover the gap, but over time the borrowing costs rise, and eventually the debt eats up all your flexibility. The 3% goal is essentially the discipline point. It's the red line that separates smart leverage from reckless overspending. The reason it matters so much is because it sets a sustainable balance. It doesn't demand austerity. It doesn't demand shutting down the engines of growth. It simply demands responsibility. History has proven this works. In the 1990s, the U.S. faced a similar problem. Deficits were climbing, debt was ballooning, and confidence in fiscal management was slipping. But then, leaders got serious. Spending was cut, revenues were aligned, and the deficit came down to sustainable levels. The economy didn't collapse, it thrived. Productivity surged, markets expanded, and America entered one of its strongest economic decades. That was discipline in action, and it worked. The playbook already exists. What's missing now is the courage to run it again. The challenge is that discipline is always easiest when times are tough. When there's a crisis, everyone suddenly understands the need for cuts, but discipline matters most when times are good. That's when the tough calls actually create breathing room for the future. Cutting the deficit while the economy is strong ensures that when the inevitable slowdown comes, there's ammunition left to respond. Without that preparation, you're caught flat-footed with no room to maneuver. Here's where leadership comes in. Imagine you're the CEO of a company with ballooning expenses. You call your team together and say, "We're going to tighten up and target a 3% deficit." At first, there's pushback. Every department insists their budget is untouchable. Everyone argues their work is essential. But as the leader, you know that without discipline, the entire company is at risk. You make the cuts, you hold the line, and you focus on the areas that drive growth. That's what saves the company. That's exactly the kind of leadership America needs right now. What does hitting 3% look like in practice? It means setting priorities. It means distinguishing between what drives real growth and what just maintains appearances. It means cutting programs that drain resources without producing results, restructuring taxes in ways that boost efficiency, and building a leaner, more focused government. It's not about taking opportunities away. It's about ensuring opportunities exist in the future. Because if debt keeps ballooning, the opportunities vanish on their own. The alternative is ugly. If the deficit keeps running above sustainable levels, debt compounds at a pace that outstrips the economy. Interest costs explode, investor confidence erodes, and the government eventually finds itself borrowing money just to make interest payments. That's when the credit markets lose faith, rates spike, and the system spirals. Once that cycle begins, fixing it is no longer about discipline, it's about survival. And survival usually comes with massive pain, slashing budgets overnight, sharp recessions, and lost decades of growth. The truth is, hitting the 3% target isn't just an economic move, it's a credibility move. It signals to markets, to investors, to citizens, that the system is under control. It's the equivalent of telling shareholders, yes, we've been overspending, but we've taken corrective action, and here's the plan to restore profitability. That restores confidence, and confidence is the foundation of growth. Without it, nothing else matters. Leaders have a choice. They can keep kicking the can down the road, pretending the problem will solve itself, or they can confront it now, while there's still time. Every entrepreneur knows the danger of ignoring early warning signs. The competitor who reinvents early survives. The one who waits until the market shifts too far gets left behind. America is facing that exact moment with its finances. 3% isn't just a number. It's the pivot point between stability and collapse. The path forward requires courage. It requires telling the truth about the sacrifices ahead and making the case that short-term discipline secures long-term prosperity. No one cheers when you cut spending or restructure budgets, but everyone benefits when the foundation holds. The question isn't whether the deficit will come down eventually. It's whether we choose to do it on our terms or wait until the market forces it on us. One is a strategy, the other is a crisis. The goal is simple: act with discipline today so the future isn't defined by desperation tomorrow. That's how you run a company. That's how you run a nation, and that's the only way to make sure America doesn't stumble into a debt trap it can't climb out of. When you run a company, you quickly learn that indecision is often more dangerous than a bad decision. At least with a bad decision, you learn, you adjust, and you move forward. With indecision, nothing moves, the problems compound, and the company drifts closer to collapse. That's the exact problem we're facing right now in America's political system. Gridlock. Everyone knows the debt crisis is real. Everyone knows that running deficits at unsustainable levels is a ticking bomb. Everyone even knows the playbook for fixing it, because it's been done before, and yet nothing happens. Politicians on both sides sit frozen, paralyzed by fear of voter backlash, trapped in endless finger-pointing while the debt keeps rising like floodwater in a basement. Here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. Political paralysis is a luxury this country cannot afford. Every year of inaction adds trillions more to the debt. Every year of delay makes the solutions harder and more painful. But politicians aren't thinking in years. They're thinking in election cycles. They're thinking, if I make cuts now, I'll lose votes tomorrow. That short-term mindset is poison. It's the same as a CEO who refuses to lay off staff or cut costs because they're afraid of bad press, even though the company is bleeding money. What happens in those cases? The company doesn't just suffer, it collapses, and everyone loses their jobs. The irony is that the solutions are not mysterious. Economists, investors, and even the politicians themselves know what has to be done. Cut the deficit to sustainable levels, restructure spending, and stop pretending the country can spend its way out of a debt spiral. But the fear of backlash keeps action off the table, and this is where the time bomb analogy becomes real. Gridlock isn't harmless, it's not neutral, it's not just politicians standing their ground. It's actively pushing the nation closer to a crisis point, because when the bomb goes off, it doesn't matter who was right or wrong in the argument. The damage is done, and it's catastrophic. This is what markets are watching. Investors don't just look at the numbers, they look at leadership. They ask, is there a plan? Is there courage to execute that plan? Or is the system so broken that no serious decisions can get made? If the answer is gridlock, confidence evaporates, and confidence is everything. Without it, interest rates climb, borrowing costs explode, and suddenly the spiral accelerates. This is how stable economies tip into crisis. It doesn't start with numbers on a balance sheet. It starts with the realization that leadership is missing. Think of the message this sends internationally. Allies see paralysis and begin to doubt America's reliability. Rivals see weakness and push harder. The global stage doesn't wait for gridlocked politicians to catch up. It exploits the vacuum. That's why this isn't just a financial issue. It's a geopolitical one. Political gridlock undermines America's ability to act decisively not only at home but abroad. And in a world already shifting with new alliances, wars, and economic rivalries, paralysis is the one thing that guarantees decline. What makes this especially dangerous is how disguised it feels. Gridlock doesn't have the shock factor of a market crash or a war. It's slow, it's silent, it feels like nothing is happening. But behind that stillness, the debt is growing, the interest payments are compounding, and the structural damage is deepening. It's like termites in a foundation. From the outside, the house looks fine, but one day, with no warning, the beams give way, and the collapse is sudden and total. The frustrating part is that real leadership could change everything. Imagine a business where the board of directors is split, half saying, spend more, half saying, cut costs, and the CEO just sits quietly, unwilling to risk offending either side. That company wouldn't last long, but swap in Congress for the board, and you've got the current reality. The leaders who dare to make tough calls are rare, because the system punishes courage and rewards delay. But courage is exactly what's needed. Not someday, not when the crisis is already here right now. Here's the bottom line. Every business leader knows the price of ignoring reality. You can delay hard choices, but you can't escape them. Eventually, reality forces the decision on you, and by then the options are ugly. Political gridlock is creating that same scenario on a national scale. The longer leaders wait, the harsher the reckoning will be. And when it comes, it won't just be numbers on a page. It will be jobs lost, savings wiped out, markets in chaos, and a loss of credibility that could take generations to rebuild. The time bomb is already ticking. The only question is whether leadership will defuse it now with discipline and foresight, or whether we'll wait until the explosion forces change. One path is tough but manageable, the other is devastating. Indecision isn't neutral, it's a choice, and right now, that choice is pushing America closer to a cliff that everyone can see but nobody wants to admit is there. When you're analyzing risk in business, you never look at one number in isolation. You look at the bigger picture, the industry trends, the competitors, the supply chain, the regulators. A company can survive one bad quarter, but when multiple factors start colliding, that's when things fall apart. The U.S. debt crisis is already a huge problem, but the danger doesn't stop there. Beyond the debt itself, layers of global instability are forming, and together they threaten to magnify the crisis in ways that could make it far worse than anyone expects. Start with trade. Tariffs and protectionism are back on the global stage, and they're not just political talking points. They're real costs. Every tariff raises prices, disrupts supply chains, and reduces efficiency. For a nation that depends on global trust in its currency and financial system, these moves send a damaging message that America is turning inward, prioritizing short-term political wins over long-term stability. Investors and allies notice that confidence isn't just about debt levels, it's about the perception of discipline, cooperation, and predictability. When those qualities erode, global money starts looking for safer havens. Then there's the issue of geopolitical conflict. The world is not standing still. Rival powers are watching closely, and they see the cracks forming. Economic weakness at home creates vulnerability abroad. It's no accident that history shows a pattern. When great powers stumble financially, their influence on the global stage shrinks. Military reach becomes harder to fund, alliances weaken, and adversaries gain ground. What makes this moment so volatile is that economic fragility is combining with rising global tensions. From Europe to Asia to the Middle East, the chessboard is shifting. A financially strained America risks being unable to respond with the decisiveness it once could. Inflation adds another layer. It's already been an issue, but when debt climbs and political solutions are absent, the pressure for governments to print more money grows stronger. Printing money feels like an easy escape. It's invisible at first, painless in the short term. But it erodes the value of the dollar over time. And remember, the dollar isn't just America's currency. It's the world's reserve currency. If confidence in the dollar slips, it creates ripple effects across global trade and finance. Other nations begin seeking alternatives, diversifying away, and the entire foundation of American economic dominance starts to weaken. That erosion doesn't happen in a headline moment. It happens gradually and then suddenly when a tipping point is reached. The dangerous part about this kind of instability is how interconnected everything has become. In the past, crises could remain regional, a banking collapse in one country, a debt crisis in another. But today, every system is tied together. Supply chains cross borders, capital flows in milliseconds, and political shocks in one region ripple across the globe instantly. That means the U.S. debt problem doesn't just stay an internal issue. It interacts with tariffs, with inflation, with foreign conflicts, and with global capital flows. Each stress point feeds the others, and the result is a fragile system where one spark can ignite a fire everywhere at once. Think about what that means for entrepreneurs, businesses, and ordinary citizens. Markets thrive on stability. Investment flows when there's predictability. Growth happens when people trust the future enough to take risks today. Instability kills that trust. It makes businesses hold back, investors retreat, and consumers tighten up. Multiply that across the global economy, and you see how easily the system can slide from growth into contraction. It doesn't take a massive collapse. It only takes enough doubt to shift behavior, and right now, the doubts are stacking up. The biggest mistake would be to assume that because America has been the anchor of the global economy for decades, it always will be. No anchor is permanent. Empires before America thought the same, and history shows how quickly dominance can fade when economic discipline vanishes. The combination of crushing debt, political paralysis, rising tariffs, and global instability is a recipe for decline if left unchecked. And the scary part, decline doesn't announce itself. It just shows up one day in the form of a weaker dollar, higher borrowing costs, lost influence, and fewer options. But here's the opportunity hidden in the crisis. Just as businesses reinvent themselves under pressure, nations can too. The same interconnected world that spreads instability also spreads innovation and growth when managed wisely. Discipline on debt, smarter global partnerships, and investment in long-term competitiveness can flip the script. What matters is leadership, the kind that looks beyond the next election cycle and beyond the next news headline. Leadership that understands you can't paper over structural problems forever. At some point, the structure gives way. The message is clear. The debt crisis is serious, but it's not isolated. It's part of a wider storm that includes trade conflicts, inflation risks, geopolitical rivalries, and global market fragility. The storm is building, whether leaders admit it or not. The question is whether the response will be reactive, scrambling after the damage, or proactive, building resilience before the collapse. In business, the companies that survive are the ones that see the storm early and prepare. The ones that don't, they disappear. Nations are no different. America's choice is simple: confront the instability head on with discipline and vision, or watch the world change while standing still. In business, you don't wait for the heart attack to start CPR. You act the moment warning signs appear. America is sending the warning. It's our turn to step into the CEO office of the nation and lead. Let's not just survive what's coming, let's leap beyond it.